The Claudian family influenced the politics of Rome for close to 500 years. It gave Rome many notable leaders, including close to 30 consuls, 5 dictators, and 5 emperors, and the list includes Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero. The family was also known for its contempt for the plebeians and the push for the authority and high standing of the patricians. Livy states that nothing in the state was of more importance to the Claudian family than the dignity of the patricians. In this video, I explore the origins of this often obtrusive Roman family. I welcome you to my YouTube channel where I explore ancient texts, and ancient texts here I mean texts that have been around for thousands of years. At the moment, I'm going through From the Founding of the City by Titus Livius. This is a collection of books actually that was written about 2000 years ago. It covers the history of Rome from the founding of the city around 730 BCE to close to 0 AD when Augustus was the emperor of Rome. If you've not subscribed, subscribe so that you don't miss any of the videos that I publish. Appius Claudius is often considered to be the father of the Claudian family, and he was not an original Roman. And he came to Rome after the expulsion of the Tarquin, the last king. But first, let's look at who he was and what he became in Rome. Appius Claudius seems to have been someone of unique capabilities. That is because he came to Rome as a stranger, and in a very short time, he managed to get himself into the patrician class, and he also joined the Senate, and in fact was elected consul. He became a consul around the year 495 BCE, and he was a consul alongside Servilius. The year he became the consul, Livy tells us that it is the year that the Romans received the news of the death of Tarquinius Superbus. Right from the start, Appius Claudius was very contemptuous of the plebeian people. He didn't have any respect for the common people, that's what Livy tells us, and that could be seen in how he treated the people and the steps he took or the policies he adopted when he was given any position of authority in the city. In fact, Appius Claudius was the consul when the people revolted because of the enslavement by moneylenders through debt. He contributed to this crisis, which in the end made the people to secede and later on led to the creation of the office of the tribunes of the people. But how did he contribute to this crisis? First, he almost always favored the moneylenders in his rulings. Livy writes, Appius, partly from his innate love of tyranny and partly to undermine confidence felt in his colleague, gave the harshest sentences he could when debtors were brought before him. So Appius Claudius, whenever moneylenders brought debtors to him, he always sided with the moneylenders. And that over time, of course, irritated the public, especially the people who had found themselves to be slaves of the moneylenders. He also opposed any actions of his co-consul which appeared to be appeasing the public. Whenever Servilius did something as if he was trying to appease the public or to make the public not revolt, Appius Claudius always opposed these actions. Appius was furious. He accused his colleague of courting the favor of the people, denounced him as a traitor to the Commonwealth, because he refused to give sentences where debtors were brought before him. And moreover, he refused to raise troops after the Senate had ordered a levy. Appius Claudius also almost always preferred the use of force on the people, even in situations where it wasn't really necessary. For him, using force and violence seemed like the only way to deal with the public. Appius, a man of passionate temperament, was of opinion that the matter ought to be settled by a display of authority on the part of the consuls. If one or two were brought up for trial, the rest would come down. Servilius, more inclined to gentle measures, so that when men's passions are aroused, it was safer and easier to bend them than to break them. During the revolt about moneylenders, Appius suggested that the only way that problem could be resolved, it was by arresting a few of the people who were inciting the public. Livy doesn't tell us about the end of Appius Claudius the Senior. He doesn't tell us about his death, but he tells us about the coming to power of his own son, Appius Claudius, you can call him Junior. Appius Claudius Junior became a consul around the year 751 BCE, and he became a consul alongside Titus Quintius. He was very similar to his father when it came to how he saw the people, the plebeians. Livy tells us that he hated the plebeians just like his father did. In fact, the reason why the younger Appius Claudius was elected is because the patricians knew of his stand when it came to how the plebeians should be treated, and at that time the plebeians were pushing for the adoption of the law that came to be known as the plebeian law, which would guarantee them the ability to directly elect the tribunes of the people. The patricians did not want this to happen, and they looked around, and in their opinion, Appius Claudius Jr. was the best person to push against that campaign by the plebeians. He was also known to be very tough in opposing the agrarian law. I've talked about the agrarian law several times. This is a law that was supposed to give the plebeians more land, and the patricians had always stood in its way. In fact, when the plebeian law was passed, he was the last person standing against it. And in fact, everybody at the end decided to support the law, including the patricians and the senators and even the other consul, but he remained the only person who opposed it even when it was passed. When it comes to war, he was a terrible general. Livy describes him leading the Roman soldiers to go and fight the Volscians as well as the people of Aqui, and he fails terribly because of how he treated the soldiers, or how the soldiers felt he treated them. In fact, his contempt for the plebeians will not get out of the way so that he can lead soldiers into battles. The soldiers understood his hatred for them, and they didn't like him back. And because of that, they could not take his orders or his commands. They were not passionate in fighting for Rome under his leadership. In the end, Appius Claudius Jr. came back to Rome embarrassed, and when he comes to Rome, he is very much disliked because of everything that he had been doing against the plebeians, and in fact he is impeached. Before the actual trial of his impeachment happened, Appius Claudius Jr. is found dead. Livy says he died of a particular disease, which he doesn't say what disease it was, but other sources say that he ended it himself. Now, where did the family come from? And in particular, where did Appius Claudius Sr. come from? In fact, the name Appius Claudius was not his actual name. This was a Romanized version of his actual name. His actual name used to be Attius Clausius, and he came from the Sabines. Now, the Sabines were the neighbors of the Romans, and they used to fight with the Romans so many times. They used to be their enemies for a very long time. Attius Clausius was a member of this tribe. Now, at one time, when M. Valerius and P. Postumius were the consuls, there was a war coming between the Romans and the Sabines, but the Sabines were divided about this war. Some of the Sabine leaders were of the opinion that they shouldn't fight, they should sue for peace, and some wanted to fight. Attius Clausius happened to be in the group that did not want to fight Rome. Now, Livy doesn't tell us what position he held among the Sabines, but it seems like he wasn't just an ordinary citizen. It seems like he held some office amongst the Sabines, and that's how it happened that he was among those who were trying to negotiate or to argue against the war. But then his side lost. Seems like the majority of the Sabines decided that they were going to go to war with Rome. And when he lost, he ran away to Rome. Livy tells us that he came from a town that used to go by the name Regulum. When he came to Rome, he wasn't alone. He was with others who had opposed the war of the Sabines against Rome. And when they came, they were welcomed in Rome, and Livy tells us they were in fact made citizens, and besides that, they were given land, and they were identified as a new tribe that is joining the Roman nation. Livy tells us that from that point, that tribe that came into Rome from Sabine, led by Attius Clausius, became known as the Claudian clan, or the Claudian tribe. What Livy doesn't tell us is whether they were called the Claudian tribe because they were related by blood, or it just happened that they came together, they were the Sabines, and then they were given that title of the Claudian clan. Nevertheless, Attius Clausius, who now started going by the name Appius Claudius, became the most notable of the members of this new tribe. And as I've mentioned, he became a patrician himself. He was elected to join the Senate, and later on he becomes a consul. Now, he becomes the first consul of this family, or leader of Rome from this family, but he wasn't the last. After him, we have close to 30 consuls, as I've mentioned, several dictators who came from the family, and other officials of the Roman political organization, and also including, in fact, the emperors that came later on, including Augustus and Tiberius and Nero. all of them have some relations to Appius Claudius. The original Claudian family that goes back to Appius Claudius later on did form alliances with other families in Rome, and these alliances were cemented through marriage. Some of the families they did have intermarriages with includes the Julian family, and that's where now we have the likes of Augustus and Nero and the other emperors actually considered to come from the Claudio-Julio dynasty or the Claudio-Junio family. Now, the last known family member of the Claudian family to rule Rome is Nero, who was the emperor between 54 and 68 AD. We can't really say that he was a pure Claudian family member. Of course, he was a Julio Claudio family member, but of course, we can say still that makes him a Claudian. He was the last leader of Rome known to belong to that family. We can't say that others didn't come later in other positions within the structure of now the Roman Empire that emerged or grew over and became a huge empire in the next maybe hundreds of years. It's possible. Whether there are members of this family who still exist, maybe there are. We'll never know for sure. But this is a family that influenced the politics of Rome for many years, for over 500 years. It was a very influential family, despite its having the history of being contemptuous to the ordinary people, the plebeians. It did rule for a very long time. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please take a moment to like it, and I'll see you in the next video.